The great hall of Nexus Prime was filled with delegates from 100 worlds. Light poured through crystal windows that stretched toward the stars. The air smelled of different atmospheres, mixed together by ancient machines that kept everyone alive. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, where the powerful species of the galaxy made their decisions. Ambassador Katie Morgan stood near the back of the chamber. Her seat was in the last row, as it had been for 300 years. Humanity had joined the Council with hope and excitement. They had offered friendship, trade, and cooperation. In return, they received the smallest voice and the least respect. Katie was 52 years old. Her hair had turned gray at the temples, and lines marked her face from years of smiling politely at insults. Today, she wore her formal black uniform for the last time. In her pocket was a single piece of paper with words she had memorized long ago. High Speaker Thex stood at the central platform. He was a Valorian, tall and thin, with blue-gray skin that shimmered under the lights. His species had ruled the Council for 6,000 years. They believed they were the greatest beings in the galaxy, and no one had ever proven them wrong. The matter of human trade rights is denied, Thex announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. Again. The laughter rippled through the alien delegates. A Nexari representative clicked his mandibles in amusement. A group of Kirithan elders shook their heavy heads with something like pity. Katie had heard this laughter many times. She had smiled through it, year after year. She had told herself that patience would change things. She had believed that hard work would earn respect. She did not believe that anymore. Admiral Daniel Carter watched from a viewing gallery above the chamber. He was 58 years old, with short gray hair and steady hands that had commanded ships for 30 years. Beside him stood a young officer holding a communication device. Ambassador Morgan has the floor, the young officer whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Then it begins. Down in the chamber, Katie Morgan rose from her seat. The movement was small, but something in it caught attention. The laughter faded. Delegates turned to look at the human woman walking toward the speaking platform. Thex frowned. The human delegate was not recognized. I require no recognition, Katie said. Her voice was calm and clear. I am not here to ask for anything. She reached the platform and looked out at the assembled delegates. Hundreds of eyes, some with pupils and some without, stared back at her. She had faced this crowd so many times, always hoping, always believing that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would be different, but not in the way they expected. 300 years ago, humanity joined this council, Katie began. We came with open hands. We offered our ships to patrol your dangerous borders. We offered our engineers to fix your failing systems. We offered our doctors to heal your sick. We offered our traders to carry your goods through routes no one else would travel. She paused. The chamber was completely silent. We asked for nothing but fairness. We asked for nothing but respect. We asked for nothing but a voice equal to our contributions. Katie's voice remained steady, but something hard entered her eyes. We were denied. Again and again, for 300 years, we were denied. Thex raised one long hand. If the human delegate wishes to file another petition, I am not filing a petition. Katie reached into her pocket and withdrew the single piece of paper. I am reading a notice. Number. She unfolded the paper slowly. Every delegate watched. By unanimous decision of the United Earth Commonwealth, humanity hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council. This withdrawal is immediate and permanent. All human personnel, vessels, equipment, and resources will be removed from Council space within 30 standard days. Katie folded the paper and placed it on the platform. We thank the Council for the opportunity to serve. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Goodbye. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps were the only sound in the vast chamber. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Thex laughed. It was a high, sharp sound that echoed off the crystal walls. Other delegates joined in nervously, unsure of what else to do. Let them go, Thex declared. The humans have always been emotional creatures. They will return within a decade. begging for readmission. Their little worlds cannot survive without council protection. 1. Katie paused at the door. She did not turn around. A small smile crossed her face. The first genuine smile she had worn in years. Then she stepped through the door and was gone. High above, Admiral Daniel Carter activated his communication device. This is Admiral Carter to all Earth vessels. Begin withdrawal protocol. All ships return to Commonwealth space. All personnel evacuate council stations. Leave nothing behind. Across the galaxy, the message spread at the speed of light. On 100 worlds, human engineers put down their tools and walked away from machines they had kept running for centuries. Human doctors finished their final patients and packed their bags. Human traders completed their last deliveries and set course for home. They did not argue. They did not explain. They did not make speeches or demands. They simply left. On the border world of Nexar 7, Commander Ryan Peters supervised the shutdown of a defense station he had maintained for 15 years. His Nexari colleagues watched in confusion as human technicians removed their personal belongings. "Where are you going?" one of them asked. Ryan smiled politely. "Home. But the station is yours now. Good luck." He boarded his shuttle and flew away. Behind him, warning lights began to blink on systems that no one else knew how to repair. On the agricultural world of Selith 7, Dr. Lisa Hartwell carefully packed her research files. She had spent 8 years fighting a plague that killed thousands of farmers every season. Her work was almost complete. Another year, maybe 2, and she would have had a cure, but the council had never thanked her. They had never funded her research properly. They had never even learned her name. Endenine. They had never, doesn't pro. They had never even learned her name. She sealed her files and carried them to her ship. The plague would continue. The farmers would keep dying. But that was no longer her problem. In the Great Hall of Nexus Prime, the delegates eventually returned to their business. They laughed about the emotional humans and their dramatic exit. They congratulated themselves on being rid of such troublesome creatures. Counselor Yrel Moth of the Kirithan Assembly did not laugh. He was very old, with heavy gray skin and eyes that had seen many things. He watched the door where the human ambassador had disappeared, and he felt something cold settle in his chest. He had read the reports. He knew what the humans actually did. All the small and thankless tasks that kept the galaxy running. And he wondered, for the first time, what would happen when those tasks stopped being done. But no one asked for his opinion. So he said nothing. The humans left quietly. They did not slam doors or raise their voices. They did not threaten or demand. They simply gathered their things and went home. And the galaxy, in its arrogance, barely noticed them go. 6 months passed, and the galaxy continued to turn. The delegates at Nexus Prime held their meetings and made their decisions. They spoke of trade agreements and territorial disputes. They did not speak of the humans who had left. Trade Minister Vorketh was the first to notice something wrong. He was an insectoid creature with 6 arms and compound eyes that could read a dozen reports at once. His job was to track the flow of goods across council space, and lately, the numbers had stopped making sense. Shipping costs had tripled in 6 months. Cargo that once took 10 days to deliver now took 30. Some routes had stopped entirely, with no ships willing to travel them. Vorketh pulled up the old records and began to trace the problem. What he found made his antenna twitch with worry. Human freighters had been carrying 23% of all interspecies cargo. They had traveled the dangerous routes through asteroid fields and pirate territories. They had charged fair prices and delivered on time. Now, they were gone, and no one else wanted those routes. He prepared a report and submitted it to the High Council. It was filed and forgotten. On the border of council space, the Nexari defense grid began to fail. Warning lights blinked on stations that had run perfectly for decades. Weapons systems went offline. Sensors stopped detecting approaching ships. General Krixtal of the Nexari Collective demanded answers. His engineers examined the failing systems and gave him news he did not want to hear. Human engineers maintained 40% of our frontier defenses, they told him. They understood these systems better than we did. They left detailed manuals. But the manuals are in their language, and the translations are incomplete. Then learn their language, Krixtal ordered. It will take years, General. The humans have 17 major languages, and hundreds of minor ones. Their technical writing uses words we have no equivalent for. On life. Krixtal stared at the blinking warning lights. Beyond the failing defense grid, the hegemony of Drax waited and watched. They had been enemies of the Council for 1,000 years, held back only by the threat of united response. The grid flickered. Another station went dark. On Selith 7, the plague continued to spread. Dr. Lisa Hartwell had been the only researcher making progress against the disease. Her work had been methodical and careful, building toward a cure that could have saved millions. Now she was gone, and her research went with her. The Council sent new scientists to replace her. They arrived with advanced degrees and prestigious titles. They looked at the plague and declared it a simple problem that would be solved within months. 6 months later, the plague had spread to 4 new worlds. The new scientists argued among themselves about methodology and credit. Farmers died by the thousands, while researchers held meetings. Governor Thelvin of Selith 7 sent desperate messages to the Council. He begged for help, for resources, for anyone who understood what Dr. Hartwell had been doing. His messages were acknowledged and filed. The humans had kept their own copies of the research, of course. Dr. Hartwell worked in a clean laboratory on Earth, continuing her studies at her own pace. She did not think about the farmers on Selith 7 very often. She had given them 8 years of her life, and they had never once said thank you. Pirate activity surged along the outer rim. Ships vanished. Colonies sent distress signals that no one answered. Trade routes became too dangerous for civilian vessels. Captain Nathan Cole was one of the few human merchants who still operated in neutral space. He flew a fast ship with good weapons, and he knew the dangerous routes better than anyone. Now he charged premium prices for his services. A Valorian merchant approached him on a space station, desperate to move cargo through pirate territory. "Your prices are outrageous," the Valorian complained. "Human traders used to charge a fraction of this amount." Nathan shrugged. "Human traders used to have patrol ships protecting the routes. Those patrol ships are gone now. I have to protect myself, and that costs money. This is extortion. This is the market." Nathan smiled without warmth. "You wanted us gone. Now we're gone. Enjoy your freedom." The Valorian paid the price. He had no other choice. At Nexus Prime, Counselor Urelmoth requested a private meeting with High Speaker Thexaran. The old Kirathan had spent 6 months gathering data, and what he had learned kept him awake at night. "The humans are not coming back," Urelmoth said quietly. "We need to address the problems their departure has caused." Thexaran waved one long hand dismissively. "The Nexari defense grid is failing. The plague on Selith 7 has spread to 12 worlds. Pirate attacks have increased by 300%. Trade costs have... Enough." Thexaran's voice turned cold. "The humans were a convenience, nothing more. We will adapt." Urelmoth looked at the High Speaker with ancient eyes. "And if we cannot adapt fast enough, then we will find other solutions. The galaxy is full of species eager to serve the Council. The humans were not serving us," Urelmoth said slowly. "They were partners. We treated them as servants, but they were partners. There is a difference." Thexaran stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "The humans made their choice. Let them live with it. In 5 years, they will be begging to return, and we will set the terms." Urelmoth rose and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "I hope you are right, High Speaker. But I fear you are wrong. The humans did not leave in anger. They left in disappointment. Angry people come back. Disappointed people do not." He left without waiting for a response. That night, Urelmoth stood at his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond Council space, the humans were building their own future. They were trading with species the Council had ignored. They were exploring regions the Council had declared worthless. They were growing stronger while the council grew weaker, and no one seemed to notice except him. In the Great Hall, delegates continued their endless debates. They argued about borders and tariffs and ancient grievances. They did not see the cracks forming beneath their feet. They did not hear the warnings that grew louder each day. The humans had left quietly, and quietly, the consequences were beginning to arrive. Systems failed one by one, like candles blown out by a wind no one could see. Each failure was small enough to ignore. Together, they were the beginning of something terrible. But the council was very old and very proud. It had faced challenges before and survived. Surely, this would be no different. Surely the humans were not that important. Surely. 2 years after the humans left, the hegemony of Drax invaded. They came through the failing Nexari defense grid like water through broken stone. 1,000 warships poured into council space, burning colonies and capturing worlds that had known peace for centuries. The Nexari fleet fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. General Krixtal died defending his homeworld. His last transmission was a plea for reinforcements that never came. The Council had always relied on a united response to deter invasion. If one species was attacked, all would respond. But the response required coordination. And coordination required the communication networks that human engineers had maintained. Half those networks were down. Messages took days instead of minutes. Fleets arrived too late, or not at all. General Megan Sawyer watched the reports from her command station on Earth's moon. She was 45 years old, with sharp eyes and a reputation for seeing patterns others missed. The invasion unfolded on her screens like a slow-motion disaster. "They're collapsing faster than we expected," her aide observed. Megan nodded. The Drax waited until the defense grid failed. "They've been planning this for years. Should we intervene?" Megan turned to look at her aide. "We are not part of the council anymore. Their wars are not our concern, but millions will die. Millions died while we were members too." The council never seemed concerned about human casualties. Megan's voice was flat, without anger or satisfaction. "We offered them alliance. They refused. Now they face the consequences." She returned to her screens. Earth's borders were secure. That was what mattered now. On Selith 7, the plague had become a catastrophe. 40 million people had died across 16 worlds. Hospitals overflowed. Medical supplies ran out. Bodies burned in mass graves because there was no other way to contain the disease. The new scientists had failed completely. Their competing theories and personal conflicts had wasted precious time. Now they fled the dying worlds, returning to their comfortable positions on core planets while farmers choked on their own blood. Governor Thelvin stopped sending messages to the council. He had begged for help until his voice gave out. No help came. Now he spent his days walking through fields of the dead, wondering what he could have done differently. He found an old file in his records, a personal note from Dr. Lisa Hartwell written before she left. It was brief and professional, explaining her research progress and her timeline for developing a cure. At the bottom, she had added a handwritten line. "I wish you well. I'm sorry I couldn't finish." Thelvin read those words again and again. A human doctor, treated as a second-class citizen for 8 years, had apologized for not being able to save his people. Meanwhile, the council scientists who replaced her hadn't even learned the farmers' names. He closed the file and went back to counting the dead. The inner colonies of the Valorian Dominion faced a different kind of disaster. 3 major trade routes had collapsed entirely. Ships could not move food and supplies fast enough to meet demand. Prices rose beyond what ordinary people could afford. Famine spread through worlds that had never known hunger. Citizens rioted in the streets, demanding answers from leaders who had none to give. The Valorian government blamed pirates, then incompetent merchants, then finally the humans who had abandoned their responsibilities. But the people knew the truth. They had seen the human freighters that once filled their spaceports. They had bought goods from human traders at fair prices. Now those traders were gone, and no one had taken their place. At Nexus Prime, Councillor Urel Moth called an emergency session. The Great Hall was half empty. Many delegates were dealing with crises on their homeworlds. Others had simply stopped coming. their governments too broken to care about galactic politics. Urelmoth stood at the central platform, where Katie Morgan had delivered humanity's farewell 2 years before. He looked out at the remaining delegates with eyes that had grown very tired. "I have a question," he said slowly. "It is a simple question, but I fear the answer. What did the humans actually do for us?" Silence filled the chamber. "I have spent 2 years researching this question. I have read reports and examined records and interviewed officials across council space." Urelmoth's voice grew heavier with each word. "The answer is devastating." He activated a display screen. Data scrolled across it, column after column of numbers and facts. Humans maintained 40% of our frontier defenses. Humans carried 23% of our cargo. Humans staffed 31% of our medical research facilities. Humans patrolled 60% of our dangerous space routes. Humans filled gaps in our infrastructure that we didn't even know existed. The numbers kept scrolling. The delegates watched in growing horror. They took the jobs no one else wanted. They solved problems no one else would touch. They asked for nothing but respect, and we gave them contempt instead. Urelmoth turned off the display. Now they are gone, and we are learning what they were worth. High Speaker Thexaran rose from his seat. His blue-gray face had lost some of its color, but his voice remained strong. "This is not the humans' fault. They abandoned their responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" Urelmoth's voice cracked like thunder. "They had no responsibilities because we never gave them any authority. They were helpers, not partners. They could leave whenever they wanted, and they did. The failure is ours, not theirs." The chamber erupted in argument. Delegates shouted at each other, blaming different species and different policies. Old grievances surfaced. Alliances cracked. Urelmoth walked away from the platform. He had said what needed to be said. Whether anyone listened was beyond his control. Outside the chamber, he found a window overlooking the stars. The Drax invasion fleet was out there somewhere, growing stronger with each captured world. The plague was spreading. The trade routes were dying. Everything the Council had built was falling apart, and the humans were not coming to save them. Urelmoth had sent a private message to Earth, asking if reconciliation was possible. The response had been polite and brief. The United Earth Commonwealth appreciated the inquiry but had no interest in rejoining the Galactic Council at this time. No anger, no demands, just a polite refusal. That, more than anything, told Urelmoth the truth. The humans were not punishing the Council. They had simply moved on. They had built something new, something better. And they had no reason to look back. The Council had treated them as unimportant. Now the Council was learning, too late, just how wrong they had been. Urelmoth stayed at the window until the stars blurred before his eyes. But arguments would not fix the defense grid. Arguments would not cure the plague. Arguments would not bring back the humans who had kept everything running. The reckoning had begun, and no one knew how to stop it. 4 years after the humans left, the Council sent a delegation to Earth. The ship carried Councilor Urelmoth and 5 other senior representatives. They traveled through neutral space because Council space was no longer safe. The Drax had conquered a third of the old territory. Pirates controlled the rest. Urelmoth spent the journey preparing what he would say. He practiced his speech 100 times, trying to find the words that would bring the humans back. The delegation arrived at Earth and received clearance to land in a city called Geneva. As their ship descended through the atmosphere, Urelmoth pressed his face to the window and looked at the world below. He had expected to see a struggling civilization, weakened by its separation from the Council. He had expected poverty and decay. Instead, he saw beauty. Clean cities spread across green landscapes. Ships filled the skies, coming and going from busy spaceports. Orbital stations circled the planet like jewels on a string. Everything looked new and prosperous and alive. "This cannot be right," one of the other delegates whispered. "They were supposed to be suffering without us." Urelmoth said nothing. He was beginning to understand how deeply the Council had misunderstood humanity. President Christopher Hayes met them in a simple conference room. He was 60 years old, with kind eyes and gray hair that had once been dark. He wore a plain suit, without medals or decorations. He looked like an ordinary man, not the leader of a growing power. Beside him sat Katie Morgan, the ambassador who had delivered humanity's withdrawal notice 4 years before. She had more gray in her hair now, but her eyes were the same, sharp and watchful, and utterly calm. "Welcome to Earth," President Hayes said. "I hope your journey was comfortable." Urelmoth bowed his heavy head. "Thank you for receiving us. I know we have no right to ask for this meeting." "Everyone has the right to ask." Hayes gestured to chairs arranged around a table. "Please, sit. Tell me why you've come." The delegation sat. Urelmoth noticed that the chairs had been adjusted to accommodate different body types. Someone had taken care to make them comfortable. It was a small kindness, but it meant more than the Council's grandest gestures ever had. "I will be direct," Urelmoth said. "The Galactic Council is dying. The Drax have conquered a third of our territory. The plague has killed 90 million people. Our trade networks have collapsed. Our defense systems have failed." He paused, gathering his strength for the next words. "We need help. We need you to come back." Hayes listened without expression. When Urelmoth finished, the president was quiet for a long moment. "What are you offering?" he finally asked. The delegation had prepared for this question. They had brought promises of seats on the High Council, full voting rights, trade privileges, military alliance. Urelmoth listed them all, watching Hayes's face for any sign of interest. There was none. When the list was complete, Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Those are generous offers. 4 years ago, we would have accepted any one of them with gratitude. And now? Now I have a question." Hayes's voice remained gentle, but something harder entered his eyes. "What has changed?" One. Urelmoth did not understand. "Everything has changed. The Council is in crisis." "The Council's circumstances have changed," Hayes agreed. "But has the Council itself changed? If we returned tomorrow and helped you defeat the Drax and cure the plague and rebuild the trade routes, what would happen in 10 years? Would we be equals, or would we be servants again?" The delegation shifted uncomfortably. Urelmoth tried to answer, but the words would not come. He thought of Texaran, who even now blamed humanity for the Council's problems. He thought of the other species who still considered humans inferior. He thought of the systems and attitudes that had driven humanity away. Nothing had changed. Not really. The Council wanted human help, but that was not the same as wanting human partnership. Hayes seemed to read his thoughts. "I appreciate your honesty, Counselor. Your silence tells me more than any promise could." "Please," Urelmoth said. The word came out broken. "Millions are dying. Whatever our failures, surely the innocent do not deserve to suffer." For the first time, something softened in Hayes's expression. "No, they don't." He looked at Katie Morgan, and some unspoken communication passed between them. "We will not rejoin the Council. That decision is final. But we are not monsters. We will consider humanitarian aid on a case-by-case basis." It was something. It was not enough, but it was something. "There is something else you should understand," Hayes continued. "We have not been idle these 4 years. While the Council struggled, we built something new." He activated a display screen. A map appeared showing a large section of the galaxy regions the Council had ignored or dismissed as worthless. "The Commonwealth Alliance," Hayes said. 17 species, working together as equals. Some of them approached us after we left the Council. Others we found in regions you never bothered to explore. We trade fairly. We share technology. We defend each other." He smiled slightly. "We treat each other with respect." Urelmoth stared at the map. The Commonwealth Alliance was already larger than what remained of Council space. It was growing, while the Council shrank. "You built an empire," he said softly. "We built a partnership," Hayes corrected. "There is a difference." The meeting ended soon after. The delegation was given comfortable quarters and excellent food. They were treated with kindness and courtesy, which somehow made everything worse. That evening, Urelmoth walked alone through the streets of Geneva. Humans passed him without fear or hostility. Some nodded politely. Children looked at him with curiosity, rather than disgust. He found a park where an old human sat feeding birds. The man looked up as Yarelmoth approached. "You're one of the council delegates," the man said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Here to ask us to come back?" "Yes." The old man scattered more seeds for the birds. "My daughter was an engineer. Spent 20 years fixing stations on the Nixari border. They never promoted her. Never thanked her. Called her the human, like she didn't have a name." He looked up at Yarelmoth with eyes that held no anger. "Eighth, only tired acceptance. She's happy now. Has a good job, a family, a life." Yarelmoth had no answer. He returned to his quarters and found Katie Morgan waiting in the hallway. "The president asked me to give you this," she said, handing him a data chip. "It contains Dr. Lisa Hartwell's plague research. Complete files, everything she discovered. We're releasing it freely to anyone who wants it." Yarelmoth took the chip with trembling hands. "Why? After everything we did?" Katie's expression was unreadable. "Because people are dying, and we have the power to help. That's all the reason we need." She turned to leave, then paused. "We're not punishing you, counselor. We're just not sacrificing ourselves for you anymore. There's a difference." She walked away, and Yarelmoth was left alone, with a cure in his hands and tears on his ancient face. The delegation left the next day. They carried the plague research and promises of limited aid. They did not carry hope. On the journey home, Yarelmoth wept for the first time in 200 years. He wept for the council's arrogance. He wept for the suffering that could have been prevented. He wept for the friendship that had been offered and rejected. Most of all, he wept because he finally understood. The humans had not abandoned the council. The council had abandoned the humans. And now, it was too late to take it back. 20 years after the humans left, the Galactic Council ceased to exist. It did not end with a battle or a declaration. It simply faded away, like a fire that had burned through all its fuel. The great hall of Nexus Prime stood empty. The crystal windows looked out on stars that no longer cared about ancient treaties and forgotten alliances. The Valorian Dominion had fractured into 12 warring states. They fought each other for resources and territory, too busy with internal conflicts to threaten anyone else. High Speaker Thexaran had died 5 years before, assassinated by his own advisors during a failed coup. The Nixari collective had been absorbed by the hegemony of Drax. Those who survived lived as subjects of their conquerors. General Krixtal's defense stations were museums now, monuments to a civilization that could not protect itself. The plague on Selith 7 had finally been cured, thanks to Dr. Lisa Hartwell's research. But the cure came too late for 140 million people. The agricultural worlds would take generations to recover. Across the galaxy, survivors fled the chaos. They traveled in crowded ships, carrying whatever they could save. Many of them headed toward the same destination, the borders of the Commonwealth Alliance. Captain Ethan Reyes commanded a patrol vessel on that border. He was 28 years old, born after humanity left the Council. To him, the old stories about the Galactic Council seemed like ancient history, almost mythical. His ship detected a refugee convoy approaching 30 vessels filled with Kirathan survivors seeking asylum. Ethan followed protocol and contacted his superiors. "Commonwealth Control. This is Patrol Vessel Santiago. We have a Kirathan convoy requesting entry. Approximately 3,000 refugees. Awaiting instructions." The response came quickly. "Santiago, you are cleared to escort the convoy to Processing Station 7. Standard humanitarian protocols apply. Treat them well." "Understood. Control. Santiago out." Ethan guided his ship alongside the lead refugee vessel. Through his view screen, he could see faces pressed against windows, ancient Kirathans, with heavy gray skin and tired eyes. Children who had never known peace. Families who had lost everything. He thought about his grandmother, who had served on the Nexari border before the withdrawal. She had told him stories about how the aliens had treated her, the small insults, the casual disrespect, the constant reminder that humans were lesser beings. Part of him understood why some humans wanted to turn the refugees away. After everything the Council had done, Why should humanity help them now? But that was not who they were. That was not who they had ever been. Kirathan Convoy, this is Captain Ethan Reyes, of the Commonwealth Alliance. Welcome to our space. Please follow my ship to the processing station. Food, shelter, and medical care will be provided. You are safe now. A trembling voice responded. Thank you, human. We do not know how to repay your kindness. Ethan smiled. No payment necessary. That's not how we do things here. No payment necessary. No payment necessary. On the processing station, Dr. Amy Chen Hartwell supervised the medical teams. She was 32 years old, the daughter of Lisa Hartwell, the doctor who had worked on the Seleth plague. Amy had grown up hearing about her mother's experiences with the council, the years of thankless work, the lack of recognition, the quiet determination to help people who never appreciated it. Now Amy led humanitarian missions to worlds the council had abandoned. She traveled to plague-ravaged colonies with medicine and supplies. She helped rebuild hospitals and train local doctors. She did the work her mother had done, but this time she was valued for it. A Kirathan elder approached her as she examined a sick child. He was very old, with skin like cracked stone and eyes that had seen too much. Dr. Chen Hartwell, he said quietly. I knew your mother. Amy looked up. You did? I met her once, briefly, at a medical conference. She presented her research on the Seleth plague. No one listened. The elder's voice was heavy with regret. I did not listen. I thought her work was unimportant because she was human. I was wrong. Amy finished her examination and gave the child medicine. My mother never talked about the council much. She said the past was the past. She was wiser than we deserved. The elder hesitated. May I ask you something? Of course. Why are you helping us? After everything we did, after all the ways we wronged your people, why do you show us kindness? It was a question Amy had heard many times. She gave the same answer she always gave. Because you need help, and we can provide it. That's enough reason. The elder shook his ancient head. We would not have done the same for you. When humanity struggled, we laughed. When humanity asked for respect, we refused. We do not deserve your mercy. Maybe not. Amy stood and looked at him directly. But mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing who we want to be. She smiled. And it was her mother's smile, warm and genuine, and completely without resentment. We are not who you thought we were. We never were. The elder had no response. He simply bowed his heavy head and wept. Later that year, the Commonwealth Alliance held a council session in their capital. The chamber was different from the Great Hall of Nexus Prime. Smaller, simpler, with no crystal windows or ancient traditions. Delegates from 43 species sat as equals around a circular table. Humans sat among them, neither above nor below the others. They spoke when they had something to say and listened when others spoke. They shared technology freely and asked for nothing but friendship in return. President Christopher Hayes had retired years before. He lived quietly on a farm in Montana, the same farm where Admiral Daniel Carter had spent his final years. Sometimes he looked up at the stars and wondered how things might have been different, but not often. The past was the past. At the end of the council session, a delegate from a species that had once been part of the Galactic Council made a proposal. I move that we establish a monument in this chamber, a reminder of where many of us came from and why we are here. The motion passed unanimously. The monument was simple, a stone pillar with words carved in every language of the Alliance. The words were the same in all of them. To all who were told they were not enough, refugees from the fallen council came to see it. They touched the stone and read the words, and finally understood what humanity had been trying to tell them all along. Worth was not given by councils or empires. Worth was inherent. Everyone had value, regardless of what others believed. The humans had known this truth for centuries. They had tried to share it with the galaxy, and the galaxy had refused to listen. So they had left quietly and built something better with those who understood. Now, at last, others were beginning to learn. The Galactic Council was gone. Its grand ambitions and ancient prejudices were dust and memory. In its place, something new was growing. Something built on respect and cooperation, and the simple belief that everyone deserved kindness. The humans had not returned to save the galaxy. They had shown the galaxy how to save itself. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift they could give.